Thank you, Lindsay. And there you're up, Senator Jamie Eldridge.
Thank you so much. Sorry for
Not
the
here.
delay. Thank you, Jim, and great to be on this panel with Medea Benjamin, Dr. Denise Duffield, and Lindsay Koshgarian. And thanks so much for Mass Peace Action for having this event and conference. And I just wanted to, really highlight which has been referenced, but obviously, making the point that there is action to be had at the state level about reducing the risk of nuclear war. And for this session, I'm proud to once again be refiling a resolution that would actually, not just a resolution, a legislation that would divest the Massachusetts pension system investing in companies that are building nuclear weapons. So I'm filing that, I believe, with Representative Mike Connolly, and there are a couple other bills, around taking a stand, really sending a message to our federal elected officials to take action on some of the items mentioned by my fellow panelists, but also just taking a stronger stand for peace. And it's wonderful to see earlier U.S. Senator Ed Markey. So appreciate his decades of leadership on this. Glad he's back in the Senate. And I think what I would just say from a state legislative perspective is that I do think we just need to continue organizing, and Lindsay made some mention to this, is, there's so much activism on so many other issues at the state level, is making sure that we are really connecting to climate change activists, racial justice activists, et cetera, because so much of the money we spend on the military could be used for purposes to address those other issues. I certainly see it, in my district, and I have often said this at Mass Peace Action conferences, is that the district I represent is sort of a textbook example of how there are some constituents that assume that military spending really is a positive for the region, but in fact there are so many other more productive ways to invest state and, of course, federal taxpayer dollars. The district I represent includes what remains of the Fort Devens military base. It's mostly a reserves training base. The rest of the base was handed over to the state, called just Devens. And, to see the number of jobs created there through, non-military, companies, through nonprofits, through schools, the protection of open space, just so much contributing to improve quality of life for my constituents than, when that whole base was dedicated to, defending our country. So I sort of try to highlight when I'm talking with some of those other activists that, they need to be outspoken as well about reducing our military budget and having this dialogue, which with the new administration is so timely, about, passing more of those treaties and moving away from mutually assured destruction. So pleased to file, that legislation. Having that dialogue with sort of progressive activists on other issues is really, really critical. And, I will say, I had an opportunity, and I worked closely with Cole Harrison on this, is that a couple of years ago, unfortunately, the legislature and the governor at that time passed a bond bill to spend state money on our military bases. And so I led the effort against that. I was unsuccessful. But it was literally state taxpayer dollars going to sort of prop up or support our military bases, really from an economic development point of view, and trying to make the point of view, make the argument, which I know so many of the members attending this conference and the experts know, is that, money invested in, housing, environmental issues, climate change, is a much better return on your tax dollar investment than military weapons or nuclear weapons. So that's really the argument that I made. I will say that I think in the legislature, there is still a challenge that, military spending that comes to Massachusetts is entirely a net positive. So I think that we need to change that conversation by having, people sit down with state representatives and state senators, on that issue. And again, I highlight how I have seen, investing in housing and economic development in brownfields in the remainder of what is now Devon's has, created far more jobs and far more sort of positive activity than when it was a full military base. So I'm proud to file that resolution. There's a couple others that are before the legislature, and we're asking people to contact their legislators to co-sponsor these bills. But thanks so much for having me on this panel, and I appreciate all that Mass Peace Action does.
Indeed. I want to thank all the panelists for